often create better criminals, not better citizens. We must build prisons on a historic scale, deport foreign national offenders faster than ever, and speed up our courts. Yet still, despite all that, we must reform sentencing too. So, more in hope than expectation, despite, not because, of experience, and by appealing to the better angels of their nature.
UK Connors, English language requirements. Right then, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because we're about to unpick one of the most controversial policy announcements in British politics right now. And trust me, this one's got layers. Stick around. The UK has just rolled out a bombshell. Come January, if you want to live in Britain, you're going to need to speak English to A-level standard. Not casual conversation level. Not I can order a coffee level. We're talking fluent, spontaneous, university entrance exam level English. And honestly, the timing, the rhetoric, and the absolute chaos this is about to create tells us everything about where Labour thinks we are as a nation right now and where they are desperately trying to take us. Let's be absolutely clear about what's changed here because this isn't some minor tweak. Before this week, migrants only had to prove they could handle conversations you'd regularly encounter at work, school, or leisure. They needed to cope with situations likely to arise while traveling. That was the bar. Now, the Home Office is demanding migrants express themselves fluently and spontaneously and speak flexibly and effectively for social, academic, and professional purposes. Do you understand how high that bar actually is? That's not just speaking English. That's mastering English at the level of someone who studied it for years in an academic setting. This isn't integration. This is gatekeeping dressed up as policy. Home Secretary Shabana Mahmood stood up and said something that's been echoing through Westminster like a broken record. It is unacceptable for migrants to come here without learning our language, unable to contribute to our national life. There's something deeply revealing about that statement. It assumes that migrants don't want to learn English. It assumes they are coming here deliberately obtuse, deliberately alienating themselves. The rhetorical framing is everything here. She's not saying migrants struggle with English access, or that integration support is underfunded. She's saying it's unacceptable for them not to speak it. There's a moral judgment baked into that language, and it matters. But here's where it gets genuinely interesting, because this policy isn't existing in a vacuum. It's part of a sweeping package of migration overhauls that basically amount to making Britain a much less attractive destination for international workers and students. The government's thrown absolutely everything at this. They've hiked the immigration skills charge. That's what employers pay to sponsor skilled foreign workers, by 32%. That's the first increase since 2017. They are reducing the time foreign students have to find a job before they are booted out. They are demanding foreign students prove they can financially support themselves. They are restricting migrants to graduate-level work and above only. And perhaps most crucially, they are implementing time-limited visas with no path to settlement. This isn't one policy. This is a migration stranglehold. Why now? Because Britain is panicking. Net migration hit 431,000 last year, which is actually down from an absolutely staggering 906,000 figure in the year to June 2023. Think about that for a second. The worst migration numbers in recent history, and they are still not enough to satisfy the political appetite for restriction. Labour came into power promising to slash net migration, and they've gotten absolutely hammered in the media and by their own supporters for not doing it quickly enough. Rishi Sunak failed to hit even the wildest targets. So now Keir Starmer's government is essentially saying, right, we're going to make it so expensive, so complicated, and so culturally demanding that fewer people will even bother trying. The mechanism here is almost cynical in its clarity. The government's announcing 82 occupations on a temporary shortage list, everyone from bricklanes to civil engineers, from artists to IT staff, and they are saying you can recruit from abroad if you fill those roles, but only if you can't find British workers. And you've got between 18 months to 3 years to hire British people for those jobs before you're cut off from international recruitment entirely. Employers have to draw up training plans. They have to invest in the domestic workforce. What they're essentially saying is, cheaper labor is over. If you want migrants, you better be serious about it. The Migration Advisory Committee actually called this out in their report to Mahmood. They said, and this is brilliant, that a fixed-length visa might have greater incentive for employers to use a domestic workforce as a longer-term and more stable solution. Translation: we know this will make things harder for employers. We know this will make it less attractive for companies to hire from abroad. And frankly, that's the entire point. They are weaponizing immigration policy to reshape the British labour market. The government's migration SAR even admitted that time-limited visas and no route to settlement would make migrants overwhelmingly fiscally positive. That's code for, we want people who come here, make money, pay taxes, and then leave. Come, contribute, depart. We don't want permanent settlers anymore. Now, enter Boris Johnson. The man's only been gone a few years and is already rewriting his own legacy. He has been asked about those Tory promises to cut net migration to the tens of thousands, and his response is absolutely classic Boris. Did you ever hear me saying that during the Brexit campaign? He said. Basically, that was never me, mate. My mandate was to take back control, and I did that. Well, technically he did say it repeatedly, but let's not let facts get in the way of a good reinvention. What's fascinating is the language Johnson uses when he talks about migration control. He's calling for a period of assimilation and acculturation, which is a very polite way of saying cultural conformity. He said we should stop being mealy-mouthed about what people must do when they come to this country. If you go to the United States of America, you've got to become American. He invoked his time running London, where he claimed it was disgraceful that second- and third-generation Bangladeshi Londoners weren't speaking English. But here's the thing. London under Boris was a multicultural, multilingual city. He presided over neighborhoods with scores of languages and communities that thrive precisely because we allow difference to exist. Now he's rewriting that as a cautionary tale about integration failure. Johnson's making an argument about meritocracy wrapped in nationalism. He says people who get first prize in the lottery of life by coming to live in this country and get a British passport should become British, and they should be proud of it. The assumption underneath that is that becoming British means something specific. It means assimilation. It means conforming to a particular cultural template. But Britain's never really worked that way. We've always been a patchwork. What's changed is a political will to maintain that patchwork, and that's significant. When pressed about net zero migration, the absolute nuclear option Nigel Farage has suggested, Johnson stopped short. He acknowledged that some areas need skills, but then launched into a fascinating tangent about Brexit and the Ponzi scheme of mass immigration. He suggested we'd spent too much time on immigration rather than skilling up British workers. But then, and this is crucial, he talks about the pandemic period as if it was some sort of nightmare immigration surge nobody could control. Every single government department was saying they couldn't be sure crops were going to be picked or pigs slaughtered in time for Christmas. This is a revenge narrative. This is suggesting that the pandemic temporarily broke our ability to be selective about migration because we desperately needed workers. Now that we got our mojo back, we're going to be ruthless about who we let in. The reality underneath all this is that Britain's been fundamentally dependent on migrant labor for years, not just in agriculture or hospitality. In the NHS, where migrant doctors and nurses are absolutely essential to the service functioning. In social care, where we're dramatically understaffed and aging. In construction, in education, in finance. The sectors don't care about language proficiency at A-level standard when they've got empty roles and deadlines to meet. So what's actually going to happen when January rolls around and these requirements kick in? Either employers will pay premium prices to navigate the bureaucracy, meaning costs go up across the board, or they'll cut back on hiring entirely, and we'll see sectors start to strain. The A-level English requirement is a headline, but it's almost a distraction from the bigger play here. The real policy action is the time-limited visas, the removal of settlement paths, and the financial gatekeeping. Those are the mechanisms that will actually shift numbers. The English requirement is a cultural statement. It's the government saying, we're not just going to control who comes here numerically. We're going to demand they meet our cultural expectations. We're going to insist on linguistic conformity as a condition of entry. And there's something profoundly revealing about prioritizing that over, say, skills matching or economic contribution. What's genuinely fascinating is that nobody's actually asked whether this will work. Will imposing higher English requirements actually reduce migration? Possibly. Will it reduce migration to the skilled jobs we actually need filled? Probably. Will it make British public services better? That's a much harder argument to make. What it will definitely do is create a massive bureaucratic apparatus, accredited tests, home office oversight, probably a whole new industry around English language certification. It'll add cost and friction to the system, and it'll signal very clearly that this government sees migration as primarily a problem to be solved, not an asset to be managed. The whole package is coherent in its own way. You raise a financial bar for employers through the immigration skills charge hike. You shorten student visa timelines. You restrict graduate-level work only. You introduce time-limited visas with no settlement. And you demand A-level English as a cultural prerequisite. Each individual policy has a logic. Together, they form a pretty comprehensive message. Migration is going to be expensive, temporary, selective, and culturally conformist. It's going to be harder than ever to come to Britain, and if you do come, you'd better be bringing valuable skills and speaking proper English. The political calculation is obvious. Labour is taking a stance that's going to anger immigration advocates, but that polls well with the broader British public. They are trying to occupy the space between the Tories' failed tens of thousands promise and the far-right's obsession with migration as cultural contamination. They are saying, we're tough, we're serious, we're making migration work for Britain, not the other way around. Whether it actually works in practice remains to be seen. But it's unquestionably a statement about what kind of country Britain thinks it is right now. So there you have it. The English language requirement is real. It's happening in January, and it's the tip of a much larger migration iceberg. The government's fundamentally reshaping how we think about, select, and integrate international workers and students. Whether that reshaping makes Britain better or worse is going to depend entirely on how it actually plays out in practice. And that's a conversation we need to be having. Not just about language tests, but about what kind of migration system actually serves Britain's long-term interests. If you want more analysis of British politics that doesn't just accept a headline but actually digs into what's underneath it, subscribe to UK Connors right now. Hit that button. We put out videos every week that break down the stories the mainstream media isn't really interrogating. You won't regret it. Cheers.